everyone, in this episode of Motive Garage, we choose a new turbo for our R32 GTR with the aim of making more power without losing response or drivability. Now, making power in a turbo car these days is relatively straightforward as long as you've got the money. Just put a bigger turbo in, jam more air into that engine. Now, making more power, but without losing response or drivability, that is very difficult and requires some technology. Now, as turbochargers get bigger, the compressor and exhaust wheels get bigger, which makes them heavier for the same style of turbo, and they simply need more exhaust gas energy to spin them and make them work. And basically what that means is if the engine stays the same and the turbo gets bigger, most of the time what will happen is the boost curve will just move further up the RPM range. Basically the boost threshold goes higher in the RPM, and they also get a little bit laggier as when you put your foot down above that boost threshold RPM, they take a little bit longer to reach full boost. So you lose some drivability. They're obviously not as responsive and nice to drive as a street car, but if you're using two-step and nitrous and all that stuff, then it's no problem in a drag car putting a big turbo on, because it only needs to work for a certain type of driving. However, with our car, we still drive it on the street. We want it to remain nice to drive, and we want the ability to be able to go around a circuit as well as making more power. That's a very big ask. Our GTW35-1050 was an excellent turbocharger, but we simply maxed it out. So where do we go next? For us, it was a pretty obvious choice. We need better technology if we want to make more power with something that doesn't lose any response. And the ultimate answer to that is Garrett's new G series of turbo, and the one that we've been waiting for is the Garrett G35-1050. So let's take a look at it and get it on the car. The G35-1050 is a clean sheet design, but could be considered the G series equivalent of the GTX 3584 RS. It has the same size rear wheel, but the G series has 5% higher rated flow than the GTX and is rated to higher temperatures and a different material. Looking at the exhaust flow charts, you can see the G35-1050 can simply flow more. The front wheel is slightly larger with a 68mm inducer, but the same size 84mm exducer, giving it a higher trim. The compressor is now 9-blade and is a totally new CFD developed design with a wider compressor map. Comparing the two, you can see the G35 is more efficient over a wider range and able to nudge 100 pounds per minute in a part of the map. The compressor map is impressive on the G35, but an RB26 on E85 that revs hard needs a lot of flow in the rear housing. With such a small rear wheel, we decided to use the largest 1.21 rear housing on our setup. At the time of our video, housings were only available in V-band. Going from a twin scroll to a V-band, we do expect to lose a little bit of boost response. This meant we needed a new exhaust manifold, so we got hold of a new 6-boost exhaust manifold, which is the same design as the previous one, just with a V-band instead of the T4 twin scroll flange. We've had 6-boost manifolds on our car since we went single turbo, and they've been reliable and work well with no cracks or issues. We did increase the wastegate size from 50mm to 60mm for better boost control, as we had some boost creep on wastegate pressure previously once we put the big head onto the engine. To match this, we needed a TurboSmart Gen 5 60mm power gate in red. We chose a 14 PSI spring as we have a 4-port boost controller and wanted a wide range of boost levels available to us. With the new parts in hand, first step was to remove the old turbo kit before we sent the car to Dyno at Fab Tech in Newcastle to do the custom fab work required to get all the parts to fit. A new dump pipe was necessary as the G35 is a different size to our previous GTW. It's made from stainless steel and expands out to 4-inch to match our custom exhaust system. Dion also fabricated a new screamer pipe that is 2.5 inches. Dion also fabricated a new intercooler pipe and power steering reservoir to neaten up the engine bay on the hot side. We used our old intake pipe and put on a fresh K&N intake filter. We also made up some new oil and water lines from Motorsport Connections using Australian-made and owned Speedflow. With everything on, it was time to hit the dyno at Croydon Racing Developments. With the only thing changed being the turbo, it wasn't long till we had our first dyno run and became instantly obvious the setup was a little more efficient as we needed to add more fuel. Our first full dyno run on wastegate pressure saw us make 550 horsepower on only 13 psi. Impressive stuff. Initial boost input saw some very rapid increases in power. 20 psi and we're at 687 horsepower already. Couple more pounds and we were into the 700s. .24 psi saw us at 750 horsepower, so the compressor is very efficient at these sort of boost levels. A smidge under 30 psi and we're back towards the 800 mark with the air filter still on. It was then time to take it off and put on our bell mouth onto the intake pipe. Power jumped to just under 850, a new PB for our GTR on the dyno, eclipsing the GTW 3884 by 10 horsepower on the same boost. This is where the old turbo maxed out, so we're keen to see how much extra boost we could wind into the G35. .5 psi saw power rise to 870 before we reached our best of the day of 878 horsepower. Alright, so our testing has been cut a little bit short today on the G35-1050, simply due to the alternator we have on the car. It's a modified VL alternator. It's just playing up a little bit. It's been doing that every now and then where it just drops down to under 12 volts, and today it was just being a total pain in the ass. So we had less than 12 volts on those runs, and what the ECU does is it adds more fuel in to compensate, so it just stayed really, really rich. We still managed to get 878 horsepower and about 33.5 psi. We think we can go 900, but there's just no point doing it right now as we're chasing our tail. We're going to go drive the thing at Powercruise the way it is and see what it's like on the road. The boost response on the dyno, it's a little bit lazier. Obviously, no twin scroll, bigger rear housing, probably expected, and a bigger front wheel. So we kind of expected that it would be a little bit lazier on the dyno. It's not much though, so our plan now is enjoy it at Powercruise, then after Powercruise, we're going to put on a 180 amp alternator, retuner on that, squeeze it as far as we can go, and we might test out the 101 rear housing as well, just to see what sort of difference that makes on a 2.6 litre. So let's go to Powercruise and have some fun. For Powercruise, we kept the air filter on and boost between 23 to 29 psi, so between 730 and 780 horsepower. This kept it reliable and drivable on road tyres. It also enabled us to take some staff and friends for rides all weekend. The car probably saw 25 to 30 full throttle passes through the gears over the entire event. Hello Benny.
New turbo.
New everything. No, really. Well, for you it is. You haven't been to this in ages.
No.
Okay, it's the second Alright, so here's a little backstory. Ben's had twin turbos on his built RB30 26 GTR for years. I've hammered him for years, and he kept saying, no, twins are good. And I kept saying, no, twins are He may or may not be considering buying a single turbo for his latest engine build. I'm about to go put the nail in the coffin for him. Alright, Ben is a twin turbo man his whole GTR ownership life. Are you converted?
I've always liked single turbos, but I held my little flag pretty high.
Could you circuit race it?
I actually reckon this would be better.
It's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Pretty good. Alright, so we're probably taking our most important passenger for the weekend. It's Paul from Garrett, Australia. He's the boss here for Garrett, so it's pretty obvious I should probably take him for a drive. He gets to see what the new G35-1050 is like. Because am I the first person to, not the first person maybe to necessarily have one in their hand, but probably the first person to install one.
Yep, and get the feedback.
And get the feedback and get driving on it, so
see how it goes.
I guess we'll find out if you like it pretty quickly. I'll give you level 5.
That comes off, doesn't it? That's awesome.
For our viewers and yourself, this time we'll roll on from second lap. There's no point rolling on from sort of 3 grand, so we'll go at about 4.5. So that's about 4.5.
Yeah, that's good. Wow. And it's still got more in it.
Oh yeah, that's level 5. That's about 25, 26 pounder boost and 750, and it's that fast.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's pretty good.
We also decided to do some heads-up grudge racing to see what the new turbo is like to launch. We were on street tyres and we had no 2-step activated, so it's all driver control, and as you can see, it does it pretty well.
GTR got him. Oh my God, that was close.
Oh man, I bogged it a little. Oh wow, what a car.
clogged it a little and he got me, but you know what, that's life. After finishing up at Powercruise, we got right to work installing a new upgraded alternator. We used the new Lamb Speed Racing RB26 alternator, which is 150 amps with a peak of 180 amps and is direct bolt-in. We had higher voltage in the car, so the fuel mixtures changed a little, but after some strokes on the keyboard, with the Haltech Elite 2500 ECU, Jim had the car back on song. With the air filter back off and the bell mouth back on, we increased the boost to approximately 35 psi to see if we could make a little more power. After multiple runs back to back on a hot and humid day, 890 would be all we could make with the car's current setup. More boost simply wasn't making more power. For this round of dyno runs, we started the run a little later to suit the turbo better. This meant it was building decent boost at the start of the run, rather than starting 10 psi behind the old turbo. Looking at the boost curve now, you can see that not having twin scroll and a larger housing has simply moved the boost curve and power band with it up the rev range a little. Approximately 500 RPM, which is exactly what we expected. But look at the boost higher in the rev range. The G35 is able to keep making boost and more of it where the GTW3884 fell over. The power graph is the same. Our RB26 now charging hard past 9,000 RPM rather than falling over. The loss of low down power is obvious on the dyno, but can't really be felt on the road, and the Powercruise footage is proof. With a PPG 6-speed sequential, we spend most of our time up in the rev range anyway, so we're able to make the most of the new top-end power. Overall, we felt we haven't lost any drivability whatsoever. Interestingly enough, all runs were done without any temperature correction on the dyno software. But with that turned on, power was 899. Talk about a tease. With some setup changes, we believe we can crack the 900 horsepower barrier. The big question is, what do we do in what order? Some of the ideas we have is testing the hyper-tuned single throttle manifold, water meth injection, E98 race fuel, nitrous, or we put in a Nitto 3.2 litre stroker bottom end. All of these will happen at some stage, but the big question is, in what order? Tell us in the comments what you think so we can continue development on Project Supercar Killer. Just a nice Sunday drive?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It was fun?
Yeah, relaxing.
Was it scary at
No,
any time?
no.
If you're not scared during that run, then you're never going to be scared, are you?
No.
We're going to be upside down in my WRX and you still won't be scared.
No.